Good evening, residents, members and officers. Welcome to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee of the 1st of February 2023. Before we start the meeting, I would like to read out the emergency evacuation announcement. There are no planned fire drills, so if the alarm activates, please leave the building in an orderly fashion via your nearest fire exit. 2 fire exits through the partition doors are currently not in use due to ongoing works. Therefore, the fire exits are through the main doors of the hall or the storeroom adjacent to the stage. The fire assembly point is the island in front of the main entrance to the building. Please do not delay your evacuation to collect any of your belongings. Please do not return to the building until given permission to do so by council staff. Please note that the meeting will be audio recorded. Would you please switch off mobiles or turn them to silent? Toilets and hand washing facilities are available in the foyer. I'd note that there are members of the public who wish to photograph and video, so thank you, you're in the correct place. Thank you. Members, there's a need to use microphones during the meeting. When I invite you to speak, please wait until there is a microphone in front of you before speaking, as microphones are needed for the hearing loop and for the audio recording. These are all switched on and ready for use, so you do not need to adjust them. Please make sure that the microphone is close to your mouth before speaking, and please speak clearly. Members, voting will be done on a show of hands in line with the Constitution. I will ask for a show of hands for and then against recommendations, and will also ask for a show of hands for those wishing to abstain from voting. So moving on to agenda item 1, apologies for absence. We've received apologies from absence for Councillor James Gooding and Councillor Mike Wilkinson. Are there any other apologies for absence?
No one's indicating, Chair.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Councillor Mrs Gadsden. Okay, thank you. Agenda item 2, substitute members. Members, we have Councillor Mike Webb substituting for Councillor James Gooding. Agenda item 3, non-members attending. We have Councillor Danielle Belton, Councillor Ian Ward, Councillor Simon Wotton, Councillor Mrs Vilma Wilson and Councillor Jim Cripps. So welcome to you. Oh, sorry, and Councillor Michael Hoy. How could I forget? Agenda item 4, minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of January 2023. Are the minutes agreed, members?
Agreed, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Those are agreed. Agenda item 5, to receive declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest, members?
No one's indicating.
Okay, no one's indicating. Thank you. Agenda item 6, we are moving on to... Sorry.
You moved on.
Sorry.
Declarations of whipping.
Ah, yeah. Are there any declarations of whipping?
Well, on behalf of RDR, I can tell you that there is no whipping.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item 6 is the Mill Hall Event Centre outcome of the community expressions of interest process and future operating costs. I'd like to ask Councillor Ian Ward, the portfolio holder of assets and investment, to make a statement before we move forward.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you for inviting us to this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting to discuss the outcome of the community expression of interest process and the future operating costs pertaining to the Mill Hall, as well as the following item, the Community Investment Plan. The documents you have before you this evening are the facts and the figures collated over a period of time that we consider are required to make the Mill Hall operational as an ongoing successful project. If it is not already obvious to some, I would like to make it plain that this administration and I, as portfolio holder for assets, are committed in intention in making this Mill Hall a success. We will be looking at all the opportunities that will inevitably follow subsequent to yourselves looking at this high-level document and the information pertaining to it, and making any recommendations as you see fit that would assist the executive, myself and the officers in achieving a venue that the residents of Rayleigh and the district can be truly proud of. At this moment, the Mill Hall is open, taking bookings, and as an indication of intent, the reception for the council in Rayleigh, the reception there will be here at the end of this week, as well as the CAB, which is in residence at this moment. So as you see, the repurposing itself continues to be ongoing, but the documents you have before you will enable it to go forward into a more vibrant and exciting future. And I'd like to hand over.
Sorry, thank you, Councillor. Before you do, could I just welcome, we've got 3 visitors tonight who are going to speak about the process. We've got Scott Williams and Julie Salford from the Mega Centre, and also we've got James Edmond from the Design Cabin. Welcome to all of you. You're not here on trial, so welcome and try and relax. Thank you. So could I hand over to Phoebe Barnes, Director of Assets and Investment, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. Members will be aware that on the 13th of July, the decision was made to open the Mill Hall Arts and Events Centre. The building was subsequently opened on the 12th of September. Following that decision as well, a community expression of interest was started, and the report details the process and updates the committee as to where we are with that process. Previously, the site had been part of the ADP, and therefore it was deemed mothballed, and the operating budgets were removed from the council's medium-term financial strategy. Since then, the decision has been made to take the asset out of the ADP, and it is no longer part of the ADP. Therefore, this report is highlighting the information that we know now around the financials, what we require to build into the council's medium-term financial strategy to ensure the building can remain in the interim operational by the council whilst we build up that full business case as to what the future of this building will be and how it will be operated. So this report is the start of that process to develop that full business case around the Mill Hall, and happy to take questions around it all. Thank you.
Okay, members, are there any questions on the floor? Councillor Mrs Newport.
Yeah, I have a question. It's page 6.6 of the report, and it's point 9, where the report makes reference to the buildings condition survey. Members did request this at the pre-scrutiny meeting. Chairman, can you tell me if we've received that or where I can find it?
We've not received that, but I'd ask Phoebe if you can explain the nature of that report.
Yep, so the report is a report commissioned to a RIC surveyor, who they have produced that kind of granular operational detail around what the asset needs in order to remain compliant is one area, and also open. The report does summarise the quantities and what needs to be done. It's not that it's the request came in, and it's a large report to then try and circulate as a document. It's not that it can't be circulated and happily circulate it after this meeting.
But
it's
we
just,
requested it before the meeting.
I wasn't made aware of that until earlier today, so that's why it didn't come. But as the report highlights all the key areas around that report that officers are working to. It's produced by a RIC surveyor. It's addresses all the risk areas, analyses them risks from risk 1 down to kind of low risks to the council. So we've prioritised them over the 15 years as to what needs to be done relatively quickly and what can be done at a later date, profiling the investment required in the building.
Sorry, can I follow up on your behalf, Councillor? Can members have a soft copy made available of that report?
Yeah, it can be made available. It's just we just didn't have the time from when I got the notification. That is all. The report was part of the AOI process as well that did go out, so members can have that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mr Newport.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Phoebe, for your response. I found that quite a lot to take in as you were just verbally explaining those reasons. I'm extremely disappointed that we haven't received that information in a timely fashion as we did request it at the pre-meeting, and that is the purpose of a pre-meeting. So, Chairman, I hope you will take that away. I've got a question that I'd like to put to the Chair to start with, and that is, today he sent us an email stating that today we're fortunate to have 3 witnesses here, and I thank you all for attending and giving up your own time to come into this overview and scrutiny committee meeting. And he has told us in this email, and I'm going to ask him if this email still stands tonight, is that all questions to our witnesses should be put to him, and he will ask those questions to make sure that we as members don't accidentally stray into commercially sensitive or embarrassing areas for the visitors. I find this extremely disappointing, and I do not feel that that upholds the Nolan principles of openness, transparency, and respect for the work of the committee. And I think that I would like to know if that email that we've received today still stands now, as when I received this email, I immediately phoned the chairman and asked him to go back to officers and state that I was very unhappy with that process. So if the chairman could answer that, that would be great.
Yep, that does stand. Can I ask Mr Hunkin just for the considered advice on that, please?
I think this has been put in place because of the fact that we have our preferred partners here today, and we're still actually going through the process of making sure that we have a business case of which they are actually helping to develop as well. So I think when you're putting questions to officers and members and you have a report in front of you, I think that's very, very straightforward. But when you're actually dealing with third parties here who haven't really been part of the process in its entirety, then there's a need just to make sure that we are focusing on the right areas.
Councillor Newport, yep.
Chairman, on that basis that the email still stands, I would like to move to defer today's this item on the agenda so that we can resolve these outstanding issues with the witnesses, and that this council then can take forward open scrutiny on this item.
Okay, do you have a seconder? Yeah, I second. Councillor Mr Mason, thank you. Okay, members, so... Yep.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I also received the email, no surprise there, and I took a look at government guidance, and in particular, a document entitled Statutory Guidance on Overview and Scrutiny in Local and Combined Authorities. It was dated 2019, and surprise, surprise, the foreword came from a Mr Sunak when he was Minister of Housing at DCLG. Given his other statements about propriety and so forth, I decided to take a good look at this document because it must have got his seal of proprietary assurance. I couldn't find anything in there which might require us to take this course of action. And in fact, looking at the document as a whole, I concluded that actually it was incongruous with the ethics and approach of the whole document, which is statutory guidance. Thank you, Chairman. So that is the reason why I've seconded it.
Okay, thank you. So the motion then, would you repeat the motion, please, Councillor Newport?
Yes, Chairman. I propose to defer this item to resolve the issues that have been pointed out in this email with the witnesses, and have and that the council can conduct the scrutiny work with open scrutiny.
Okay, so members, we have the motion. So those in favour of the motion, would you please indicate by raising your hand? Okay. Thank you. Those against? Those abstaining? Okay, so that motion is carried. So this item will be deferred until the next meeting. Can I apologise to the guests? Unfortunately, no. The motion's been made now, so it's closed it.
Running professional businesses in our town, and actually I've got a record here of over 15 opportunities when you've done exactly the same as you've done to us tonight. And that is actually quite disrespectful to my colleague and my colleague. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah.
I'm going to a family funeral tomorrow. Should have gone today with my wife. Said no to respect you.
Can we apologise?
Actually, you've shown very little, very much disrespect to us all.
As chairman, all I can do is apologise.
My wife, funeral now. Thank you.
Yeah, Vice Chair.
The whole day out.
Excuse me, to our guests, we were unaware of that motion coming forward, so we do apologise. Thank you.
So just to be clear, the motion that was put was relating purely to the witnesses, not to the report overall. Not that item. Item 6 is the... Right, so the whole item. Okay. Yeah. Okay, moving on to item 7. Phoebe Barnes, Director of Assets and Investment, will introduce the report. Phoebe.
Thank you, Chair. On the 25th of March 2022, Rochford District Council agreed to enter into a deed variation with Sanctuary. Sanctuary did pay the council £1 million of funding to support ongoing place shaping work across the district. This fund was provided to council to use in relation to the community investment programmes, projects and initiatives. The money is being held by the council in a ring-fence reserve to be spent in accordance with the community investment plan objectives. This report outlines what them objectives are and looks at how we can draw down on that funding to progress them objectives for that money. So high-level objectives are that we want any money spent from that reserve to promote and deliver regeneration opportunities that support our residents, businesses and visitors and provide a positive impact on their lives, to support and develop to support the development of sustainable homes and communities while prioritising those residents with the greatest needs, and to promote and support opportunities that focus on improving the health and well-being of our residents. The report does then go into looking at allocating financial values to them proposals and them objectives up to that value. It's not a full amount that will be spent, it's a value up to that value to be able to draw that down as officers to deliver them objectives for that plan. And the purpose as well, we are looking at proposals and objectives that kind of regenerate money, so we are putting kind of money back into the council's general fund and supporting the financial sustainability of the general fund going forward. Thank you. Happy to take any questions on that as well.
Thank you. Members, are there any questions? Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Chairman. I find myself a little confused, and may I ask these questions in an open and transparent way? Last evening, Mr. Willis very kindly hosted a Zoom discussion, a briefing on the budget as approved. The content was approved by the leader. And within that, there was a sum put aside for Mill Hall. Is that the same? I'll try not to give information that shouldn't be in public, so I've referred to it generally. But is there any coincidence, Mr. Willis, as you're here, between that figure you spoke about last evening and the figure we now see in this report?
Thank you, Chair. It's coincidental, I can say. The figure in this report is capital in nature to carry out works. The figure that Councillor Mason's referring to was in respect of ongoing costs of running, management and maintenance of the building. So it was coincidental that it was a similar, almost the same sum.
Does that answer the question, Councillor
Can I
Mason?
come back on that, Chairman?
Yep.
I'm also concerned that around the issue of Mill Hall, no one's been able to advise me what the position is with regard to the current contract and/or lease and the requirement to refurbish Mill Hall to the same condition as it might be released from contract or lease.
Councillor Mason, that was actually in the previous report. There was a, which we've now deferred, I believe, about the cost. Can you be specific where in item 7 that you're referring to, please?
Purely the fact we're talking about Mill Hall, Chairman. I don't differentiate in the council between reports that aren't subject to exempt. They cross-fertilise, they give cross-information between each other. And if it refers to spending on Mill Hall, I believe in scrutiny, I'm entitled to ask a question that's coincidental as well.
So specifically, we're looking at item 7 at the moment. Specifically, which is the figure that you're referring to in the report, please?
I will refer to item paragraph 4.3 on page 7.3.
Sorry, Phoebe, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. So you are correct. The purpose of this report is to actually draw down the funding in order to fund the costs that we were allocating to Mill Hall in item 6. So it is capital expenditure on the Mill Hall building, and the community investment plan, which is a ring-fenced earmark reserve, will be drawn down to fund that budget request, and this proposal is asking for that drawdown from that reserve to fund the budget request as outlined in the report that was in item 6.
Councillor Mason. Councillor Newport.
Thank you, Chairman. Phoebe, if I may, through you, Chair. I'm a bit thick with numbers, so bear with me. I think what maybe Councillor Mason's saying, and he can correct me, but I want to understand this. If you want to spend £185,000, how do you know you need to spend £185,000 if we don't know what works are going to be done to reinstate when we release the lease? And that's the way I'm looking at it. So if they come back and they put it in perfectly shiny new order, do we still need to spend that £185,000? That's what I don't understand. I may be on a different track to Councillor Mason, but could you
Yeah.
clarify for me?
So regarding the lease around the Mill Hall building, this was varied in December 2020 regarding the impacts of COVID-19, but then also it around the leisure sites, but this building was taken out of that lease. Therefore, the lease surrounding it coming back to a set standard was no longer in that, because the decision was that this building was in the ADP and therefore it was mothballed. What then happened is once the Mill Hall was reopened, we entered into negotiations with Fusion around a contract for them to carry out just the repairs and maintenance on this building. Therefore, the money that's being requested to be drawn down from the community investment plan reserve is money that we've allocated from the stock condition survey that was carried out, and this is kind of the risk areas that are priority. Therefore, this is why we're putting it into this, to fund them risk areas, to give some longevity to the asset and make it compliant instantly, rather than it becoming a non-compliant asset. There's no budget to it at the moment, hence why we're asking for this fund to be drawn down to give the budget.
Councillor Newport.
Thanks, Phoebe. So essentially, you're saying that it's been waived through the variation in the lease. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because the decision was to mothball it, therefore it was going to be developed, therefore it wasn't being returned to a set standard, I would say, because the decision at that time was that it was going to not be operational. So the negotiations with Fusion was that they could invest that money elsewhere, which they have done in the leisure centres. But obviously now the asset has reopened and therefore we need to do some work to it.
Okay. Any other questions? Yeah, Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to ask a question around 1.2, paragraph 3, the £75,000 that's been set aside to deliver a comprehensive community and stakeholder engagement process that's mentioned again under 4.7, that the Council will commission professional expertise to lead a community engagement process. About 12 months ago, I was involved in the Welcome Back Fund, and I believe that there was a very comprehensive process that took place at that point, linking with stakeholders, and an excellent piece of work was carried out, which the Council now has. I do hope we're not going to be duplicating that work that took place 12 months ago, please. Thank you.
No, I confirm that we won't be doing that. The purpose of the money, yes, is to engage external support, but it's kind of a gold-plated engagement process that that has also been used from under the One Team partnership at Brentwood, with them bringing their housing development sites through to kind of a planning stage. We're looking at potentially using the same supplier who've done lots of engagement with residents, tenants, businesses, and pull that all together to the point where actually we had residents speak at the Planning Commission in favour of what we was doing. It's a money up to, and the detail of that strategy and that engagement needs to come back, but it's just allowing us to progress to that stage of it. As again, not saying we're going to spend all that money, we just need some ability to get to that stage where we can come forward with what we want to deliver, how we're going to deliver it, and then getting the sign-off to do it and completely spend that funding.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs McPherson. Sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. I think we've been put in a little bit of a predicament tonight. Councillor Mr Mason brought forward a reason for item 6 to be deferred with Councillor Newport. Unfortunately, the information that you quoted, Councillor Mason, none of us are privy to, so therefore it was quite difficult for us to have voted. You were quoting a paper that, if you would like to explain again what it was that you quoted. Councillor Mr Mason, I'm just trying to I'm just trying to set a picture here because it's very difficult for us now to be reviewing item 7 based on the fact that we've had to defer item 6. So I'm not sure, Chairman, what we should do with this item. I think there's a few more questions, but it is a difficult predicament that we're in at the moment.
Can I move for an adjournment, a 5-minute adjournment, because I just want to take some advice on this. So we'll take 5 minutes, please, members.
Upon us, if we'd known it, we could have actually read it and confirmed that it was relevant. That was the idea.
Yeah, we've adjourned. Yeah.
Yeah, as usual. Okay, I'm all right now.
Okay, members, we are ready to restart. Okay, thanks, members.
Councillor Eaves was next.
So the reason why I wanted to have the adjournment was to make sure that we were clear about the relationship between item 6 and item 7. So although item 6 and item 7 are connected, item 7 isn't dependent on item 6. So we can still go ahead with looking at item 7 and looking at the recommendations for the executive. Councillor Eaves.
Thank you, Chair. Item 4.7, we've already been discussing this to a degree, where we've got the Council will commission professional expertise to lead a community engagement process. Part of the concerns that I have with this is that money will be expended to that, but one of the things which is very important, which came out of the working group, was that to realise the full potential of this place, there needed to be some meaningful market research done. Now, is that to be included with the professional expertise that the Council are looking to do under 4.7 on page 7.4, please?
Thank you. So that's, will there be a full marketing research, a marketing exercise, including market research? That's,
yes.
Is that the question?
Yes, that's correct.
So the community investment plan is not solely restricted to Mill Hall. The engagement strategy is around kind of regeneration and opportunities across the whole district. So there will be an element of market research into it if there is opportunities around this building, but not necessarily, because the purpose of the community investment plan objectives, as highlighted in my introduction, is around promoting, delivering regeneration opportunities, development of sustainable homes and communities, and opportunities that focus on improving the health and wellbeing of our residents. So that purpose of that engagement strategy is not solely to one asset, it's across the whole district and what the council kind of owns in its own asset portfolio.
Yeah, Councillor Eaves.
Thank you, Chair. So am I to understand then that we are not going to be looking at meaningful market research for this building?
Yeah, Councillor Ward.
Yeah, Councillor FD. I mean, obviously...
Councillor Eaves.
Oh, sorry, Eve. Sorry. Okay. My apologies. Councillor Eaves. With regard to item 6, which has now been excluded, a lot of the detail in regard to the question you have asked sits within item 6, which has now been excluded. So I can say that a lot of the question that you have asked will be answered in item 6. With regard to this particular item, proposal 2, in regards to the marketing, that is to cover the whole of Rochford District and other items, our assets within that area. Thank you.
Councillor Rees, not putting words into your mouth, but I mean, that could still be a recommendation from this committee onto the report to the executive.
Yeah, the issue is obviously the relation between items 6 and 7. The recommendation that I would be looking at would be that within the community engagement, that we should be looking at some meaningful market research for this place to actually make this a valuable asset rather than one that's just open.
Okay, have we got that recommendation? So can you read that again, please?
Within the community engagement,
Yep.
to engage in meaningful market research for the Mill Hall, to enable this place to reach its full potential.
Okay, and what we'll do is if we get any more recommendations, we'll vote on those at the end. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Who's next? Councillor Mrs McPherson.
Thank you, Chair. Phoebe, on page 7.4, the last paragraph, 4.12, could I ask you, what is the relationship between this proposal and the emerging local plan?
So the purpose of the regeneration strategy is to look at the asset portfolio within the whole district, and there will be links between the current local plan and the emerging local plan, and obviously by bringing sites from REBA stage 0 to REBA stage 2, that would all be considered and then be presented forward. So there are interlinks, but specifically for this, it's just to get it to REBA stage 0, REBA stage 2 on our own asset portfolio, or looking at the land and options that we have around the district, and bring them opportunities forward.
Thank you. So a proposal here that the regeneration strategy is aligned with the new local plan, please, Chairman. Do you have a seconder? Yep. Got one more question, please. Phoebe, this is obviously a considerable amount of money. Can you tell me what work is being done to leverage in grants through this funding?
So the council always looks at opportunities to exhaust any grant funding, any opportunities of funding. What I would say is the purpose of spending this money is to look at sites, to look at potential homes. By bringing it, as I said, to REBA stage 2, we can then look at how we work with Homes England, who look to then grant fund to potential kind of build and opportunities around that. So, but we need to get to that stage of looking at designs and assumptions and viabilities around potential sites, getting approval of them potential sites, and then working with the likes of Homes England funding around their grant funding process. So officers would always look to maximise grant funding.
Then also looking at, sorry, Chairman, if you don't mind, also looking at the capital investment in a building such as this, how will you be accessing grant funding towards that, please?
It's difficult as a local authority to get a lot of grant funding compared to kind of charity-based organisations and that. But looking at kind of the sustainability of the building, environmental sustainability, we're working on that around opportunities and what central government funding we can apply for in order to enhance the environmental sustainability of this through kind of what options we have around potentially solar panels, heat source pumps, etc., what we can do. And again, officers will always look at opportunities of how we can fund that, but until we know what the outcomes are, it's then difficult to determine what grant funding pots we are applicable for.
May I make a proposal, Chairman?
Yep.
That we, as a council, look to partnership work with charitable organisations and others that are able to access grants. Thank you.
Any other questions from members? Yeah, Councillor Webb.
It's me. Thanks. Thank you, Chairman. Can I just check the governance arrangements, please, for this funding pot? Looking at 1.2.3, delegated authority to be given to the Interim Director of Resources and the Director of Assets and Investment in consultation with the leader and the portfolio holder for strategic planning and assets and the portfolio holder for finance, economy and climate, and then taking you to I think I said it later in the report who then that governance is. Can we just check the governance arrangements, please, in terms of how this funding will be agreed going forward? Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Wall, would you like to take us through that?
No.
Sorry, just to finish, it's 4.15. It's the second part of my summary. It is proposed that when any of these funds are required, the Interim Director of Resources and the Director of Assets and Investment will consult with the lead and portfolio holder for strategic planning and assets and the portfolio holder for finance, economy and climate before any funds are committed against these proposals. I think we need a bit more governance around that, please, Chairman. Thank you.
I think that is a recommendation then, Councillor Webb. Unless you've actually got answers to that. I'm looking at the portfolio holders.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much indeed, Chairman. I mean, 4.15 says it is proposed that when any of these funds are required, the Interim Director of Resources and the Director of Assets and Investment will consult with the leader, the portfolio holder for strategic planning and assets, and the portfolio holder for finance, economy and climate before any funds are committed against the proposals. I can't see any problem with that personally, and someone thinks differently. Thank you.
Councillor Webb, do you want to come back?
I just feel it's a very large amount of money for the leader and the two portfolio holders to have agreement over. I'd feel more comfortable if there was a recommendation either to come back to ONS or to come back to executive for that final decision, rather than just agreeing how this money will be spent. And particularly like my comments around the £75,000 going potentially to consultants, I would like somebody to have a scrutiny of what that actually will look like. Thank you.
Chairman, if I could just pass this over, as the portfolio holder for finance, economy and climate has been mentioned, she now wishes to have a word, if she may.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you. The report outlines a breakdown of the funds, so it's not 1 million in its entirety, it's broken down into separate categories. And I think actually the reason for naming two portfolio holders and the leader was to give it additional scrutiny as opposed to giving delegated powers to just one officer and one portfolio holder, which is often the case, because it is a large sum of money. But we aren't talking about 1 million in its entirety for one potential project. It is broken down in the report, which is what we're looking for recommendations and approval on, because there are multiple factors, and the up to £75,000 being a prime example, that needs extreme scrutiny to see if that needs to be spent, and if it is being spent, why, and what are the outcomes expected to be of that expenditure. We don't just want reports to sit on shelves, there needs to be an objective. So I think the reason there's more portfolios than normal is to give it extra scrutiny. I understand what Councillor Mike Webb is saying, but I think we need to remember that this is already being broken down into categories, just for consideration.
Okay, thanks. Did you?
Thank you, Chair. I'm hoping, am I switched on now? Thank you, Chair. Councillor Belton has somewhat stolen my thunder in terms of the advice that I was going to give to the committee. In terms of governance, obviously once a sum is agreed by council in the budget, if it relates to an executive function, the executive then have the authority to decide how and when that is spent. As Councillor Belton has stated, here we're actually giving the delegation to a number of people to kind of give that added protection from having it all delegated to a sole decision maker. However, that would equally be fine within the governance arrangements. The committee could make a recommendation to alter the people involved, but I think it's also quite important to remember that many of these projects will need to operate at pace, and so therefore having a streamlined but robust governance procedure in place is quite important. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thanks. Councillor Reeves.
Thank you, Chair. I do see where Councillor Webb is coming from on this, and I do hear the other side of the argument, but maybe what we could do is put a limit on the actual amount. If the amount exceeds £100,000, then yes, it should have more scrutiny. I am also uncomfortable about 3 people being okay spending up to 350,000 in some places. So I would suggest that we amend Councillor Webb's recommendation that if the amount of sums comes to more than, I'm open to suggestions here, but I would say 100,000, that it does come back to either the executive or to ONS for a closer look. I think that actually does dispel the consideration of some aspects needing to move at pace. If you are spending more than £100,000, I would venture to suggest that would not be something that you would commission now for it to happen tomorrow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillors. I'll take the point about the limit. I think that may be some way towards Councillor Webb. It's the realistic figure, I guess.
If I may come back. My main concern is, as we're saying, we're moving at pace onto trying to do things. If we're going to go on anywhere, we can always take it back to executive if that is something that is preferred. But I mean, realistically, we're looking at moving at some pace and getting things done. And I find it's, how can I put it? I can understand the hobbling of, we're talking of large sums, and I do understand what's being said here. But I think it is important to actually try to move things forward at pace, because it is extremely frustrating in trying to do things and we're constantly going backwards and forwards. Now, I can understand the checks and balances that are required on this governance, and I understand fully. But, I feel that there is a need that we need to have some kind of, how can I put it, equitable arrangement that will allow us to do what we need to do. Thank you.
Councillor Reeves.
As I said, I think that if there are any projects that need to move at speed, you are not going to be moving projects that are in excess of £100,000 at that much speed, that you're going to need that much speed of decision. I think it's a reasonable thing to suggest that there is a level which you go beyond and then it must come back for more scrutiny. And I don't think that will actually hold back progress, in my opinion, but that's up to the committees to decide. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Mr Mason.
Thank you, Chairman. I support the views of Councillor Reeves and Councillor Webb. I see no reason why there shouldn't be consultation. There shouldn't be an opportunity for the executive to get together very quickly. Can't see any reason why that can't happen. Surely a meeting can be summoned very, very quickly and executed where it needs to be. I also have to observe that the names of portfolio holders and the portfolios themselves seem to change quite rapidly these days. So that's another reason for ensuring that it goes back to a body which is at least fully constituted all the time, notably the executive, or overview and scrutiny. So I support it.
Okay. Thank you. So just to be clear, the recommendation is Councillor Webb's recommendation about governance plus the 100k limit. Now, bearing in mind, this would be a recommendation that would go to the executive, and if they choose to change, to accept that recommendation, they could also choose to change any threshold as well. Okay.
As I said, I'm open to suggestions as to the threshold, but I think it is wise that there is a threshold, certainly with the figures that we're talking about here. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Any... Councillor Webb?
Thank you, Chairman. I think Councillor Ward hit the nail on the head when he said about checks and balances. I think there do need to be checks and balances here. I think Councillor Reeves is correct in saying a realistic figure, whether that's 100,000 or slightly higher than that, I'm not sure. But for me, that just seems a sensible precaution and a good check and balance to have for this amount of money, which is significant.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
No one's indicating, Chair.
I've got one, if I may. On page 7.5, paragraph 4.15, it's a general question really, but will, as part of regeneration, will parks and playgrounds form part of that?
So obviously the council does have its own parks and open spaces strategy that it is working through and has funds committed to. With any of these sites in question that we would be looking at and bringing forward, obviously again linking them into the local plan and any planning policies, we would have to consider open spaces and leisure, what leisure is provided in them, and that would also be considered. But yeah, as it stands at the moment, there's no specific commitment to that. It will be developed as we go through developing the strategy further.
Councillor Ward?
Thank you, Chairman. For the best of my knowledge, the council already has a 5-year plan for investment in parks and playgrounds. This is an ongoing thing. So, I mean, obviously we'll be looking to see what they do. And if we can marry anything up with it with regard to this funding, then we will.
Okay, thank you. And one final point is when will the regeneration strategy for the district be published? What's your timetable?
So the purpose of this report is to get the funding, to get the data and all the information we need to gather in order to make an informed, meaningful strategy which starts looking at potentially allocating sites in our ownership and what we could do with them. So once we are able to draw down that funding and are able to get all that information together, then we would look to bring back a final strategy for approval. I would expect that to be in the summer to autumn time, but I don't want to put timelines on it because depending on what recommendations go and how I can operate, potentially can restrict what we deliver in a way, but we will come back with a strategy before we move anything further.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Chairman. I heard this question whispered and it hasn't been actually asked, so I'm going to actually put it forward. I've heard references to we've got to move quickly, we've got to do things quickly, we really need to move forward with this, but I can't find any dates or expectations of times and dates in the report. I'd really be pleased if Phoebe could provide us with some scale of time so that this committee and members generally can get a feel for what's likely to be happening.
So the purpose of drawing down the funding, as I said, is to get to REBA stage 2s on sites once we look across the district, across the board, as to what is viable, what is likely to be the most viable, and do that piece of work. And then the purpose of that work would then be come back with a project timeline as to how and when we would deliver the proposals and the outlines of the principles of the community investment plan. The report is high level because we can't get to that granular detail yet without putting the resource in, as I said, to get the data and get to the timelines around the options of what we can deliver on.
Can I come back on that
Yeah.
with the supplemental? The supplemental is to say, fine, I understand that. So is there an intention to put a project plan back to ONS, and do we know when? Because we've got a work plan, you see, and we like to make sure we don't concertina. So when would you expect to bring that project plan back, please?
Again, depending on how kind of quickly we can move with getting resources in place, spending on the delivery, I would like to align that project plan would align with the regeneration strategy. So the regeneration strategy would go for approval alongside that project plan underneath it that would support it. So again, depending on how quickly we can action resources, it would look to be summer, autumn time. As soon as possible, really, because there's a lot of opportunities out there that we can do, and we need to start developing that plan. It gives sustainability to the budget. There's a raft of kind of all other avenues, again, linking it into the local emerging plan and that as well. So I would like to move very quickly with it to get the information out there for everyone to, again, start looking at it and scrutinising it and giving us recommendations as to how the district wants to move forward with this. But at this moment in time, I can't give a specific date because I just don't have that information, that detailed information yet to then move it forward.
Councillor Mason, do you want to come? Can I sort of amplify, hopefully, what you've been asking? Please. Is it? I think perhaps members of the committee might feel more comfortable if there was a high-level indicative plan. So we're not looking at buttoning down to the 3rd of September or something like that, but just a high-level indicative plan of when this is going to be, and a sort of rolling update as you firm up on the different elements. And that would be useful for committee members, I think. Would that meet your needs, Councillor Mason? Okay, thank you. Okay, members, anyone else wishing to speak? Okay, we've got 4 recommendations, and I'll ask Emily to read each one out in turn. We'll vote on each one in turn. So, Emily, please.
Thank you, Chair. If I can read out the recommendations, and they are also in various states of being proposed and or seconded. So I may just have to ask you to seek a seconder on 3 out of the 4. So the first recommendation proposed by Councillor Eaves is that the community engagement exercise should include meaningful market research to achieve the best outcome for Millpool.
Seconded.
Councillor McPherson seconded it. So those, do you want to read it out again, please, Emily?
The community engagement exercise should include meaningful market research to achieve the best outcome for the mill hall.
Members, those in favour of the recommendation, please indicate. Thanks. Members, that's unanimous. Recommendation number 2, please, Emily.
Thank you, Chair. This is proposed by Councillor McPherson, and it's that the regeneration strategy is aligned with the new local plan. We need a seconder for that one, Chair.
I'll second that from the Chair. Could you read it again just for...
Of course. That the regeneration strategy is aligned with the new local plan.
Members, those in favour, please indicate. Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you, members. Recommendation 3, please, Emily.
Thank you, Chair. This one again proposed by Councillor McPherson, that we look to work in partnership with charitable organisations and others that are able to access grants.
And I'll second that. So can you read it one more time?
Yeah, so that we look to work in partnership with charitable organisations and others that are able to access grants.
Okay. Members, those in favour, please indicate. Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. And lastly, recommendation 4, please, Emily.
Thank you, Chair. This one has been proposed by Councillor Webb and seconded by Councillor Eaves. And the recommendation is that the delegated spending authority is limited to £100,000, and any decisions in excess of this value are referred to the full executive for decision.
Members, Could you read it one more time? Sorry.
That the delegated spending authority is limited to £100,000 and any decisions in excess of this value are referred to the full executive for decision.
Okay. Members, those in favour, please indicate. Any against? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That recommendation is approved. Thank you, members. So moving on to agenda item 8, which is the Capital and Treasury Management Strategy 2023-24. Tim Willis, the Interim Director of Resources, will introduce the report. Tim.
Thank you, Chair. This report presents the Council's Capital and Treasury Management Strategy for 2023-24. This is to provide the committee with the opportunity to comment before approval at Council. Officers use Link as the expert advisors on Treasury management matters. One of the key drivers for the Council's Treasury management activity is that investments are made with a view to security, liquidity and yield in that order. This means that the Council, first and foremost, invests in trustworthy and sound institutions. And secondly, it's mindful to ensure that it has sufficient funds or cash at all times. And then thirdly, that it would seek to maximise returns on its investments. One matter I draw members' attention to is that updated prudential and treasury management codes have been adopted for 23-24. And one of the indicators that local authorities need now to publish is the ratio of financing costs to net revenue, which might attract some attention to treasury management reports across the country because it's a new ratio. As paragraph 6.5 on page 811 shows, this is negative for Rochford, as the Council's net financing cost is actually income from investments, as there is no borrowing. So that's unusual. As the Council has no debt, and with interest rates relatively high compared to recent years at least, it has enabled us to project a return on investments in 23-24 of £275,000, as is set out in paragraph 1118 on page 822. This is £250,000 more than previously budgeted, so it helps support the delivery of services next year. Unfortunately, this report was published without recommendations, for which I apologise. They are now on the screen, but I'll read them out anyway. It's proposed that the committee resolves, first, that the Capital and Treasury Management Strategy statement, including the investment instruments, indicators, limits and delegations contained within the report, be noted, that the capital expenditure forecast be noted, that the operational and authorised limits for external debt as laid down in the report be noted, and that the committee recommends to Council that the Capital and Treasury Management Strategy for 23-24, as set out in this report, be approved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions from members? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah. Just for clarification, Tim, that investment return of the 250,000 you were mentioning, was that based on funds and instruments with a 12 months maturity?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's based on up to 12 months maturity, no more. We only invest up to 12 months and no longer on any of our investments. So some of that would be on the assumption that it would be less than 12 months, because at any one time we'd need to keep available funds more easily and instantly available.
Thank you for that, but I have a supplementary question, if I may. In terms of the commercial investments, are there any funds that are used or accessed the strictly green funds? Well,
Did you say green funds?
green funds, yes. Investing in green startups, all the green initiatives that are going on at the moment.
Part of the, I will answer this, although it might not sound like it when I start answering. Part of the new codes requires local authorities to look at ethical aspects of their investments. And so we would abide by that because we abide by the code. But what that requires isn't that the council would seek to invest positively in something like green startups or something that was specifically around sustainability, but that more so that it would not invest in those types of institutions or counterparties or organisations or even countries that would damage the furtherance of environmental sustainability and green issues. So it's almost the other way around. We wouldn't invest in something that damaged the planet, but we wouldn't seek out specific investments that were specifically green or green startups.
Thank you for that explanation. Is that likely to change? The reason I ask that question is simply that we have our green credentials as a council, and it just makes sense to me that we could contribute by investing in those types of funds.
Thank you, Chair. This is an issue that many councils across the country, I know from first-hand experience, have grappled with because they seek to use what powers they have in order to further their, what are sometimes corporate objectives around climate change, for example. And one of the difficulties in using the Treasury management strategy in this way is probably twofold. In the first case, we are tiny, minuscule, Oxford District Council in terms of the funds that it has available when it comes to where it places that money. It's typically with huge banks, huge counterparties. So we, in terms of our power as an investor, is almost non-existent in terms of the policies of where we place that money. And linked to that is the second point, which is our primary objective is security. So that's the number one priority when it comes to investments. And that requires us to only invest in banks and countries that are deemed to be safe, as defined by our expert advisors and by internationally recognised creditworthiness agencies. So that would tend to mean that we are very limited as to where we would place that money. So superimposing a specific objective, no matter how laudable or otherwise, on our investment policy could potentially undermine those key tenets of our Treasury management strategy.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I do have one more supplementary question. Is that possible?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. Looking through that report, which was voluminous, quite heavy going actually to someone who's not a chartered accountant or a financial wizard, but I didn't see any mention of an external auditor being involved. Was there a reason for that?
Perhaps slightly surprisingly, external audit do not routinely, as a matter of their standard audit, conduct any in-depth audit of Treasury management activities or of a local authority. They would focus on transactions related to the financial accounts, so payments out, income received in terms of fees and charges income and council tax and business rates, as well as all payments to creditors and even payroll and such like. But what it would tend to do, what external auditors tend to do in relation to Treasury management is to pose the question, does the council abide by its own policies, the very ones that you have before you tonight? And if they are satisfied on the basis of fairly superficial questioning that the council does abide by those and they are in keeping with existing prudential codes, then they'll be happy. I think the exception to that is if through their investigations and audit into the financial accounts, they uncover certain anomalies or exceptions to the norm, or some red flags when it came to things like liabilities, then they would start delving deeper into aspects of the accounts that would include treasury management. So in a typical council, there'll be very little mention in the audit findings report of the external auditor in relation to treasury management. I think in the case of Rochford District Council, there's even less likely that there would be any investigation into the treasury management by the external auditor, not least because half of treasury management doesn't even exist at Rochford District Council. There's only investments, there's no borrowing.
So that's standard, is it? Standard practice. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other members wishing to speak? Councillor Mason.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Tim, can I ask you to look at table 5.2 on page 8.8? I hope you've got the same pagination as I've got. Could you just put some flesh on the bones on capital expenditure? Because it's moving around quite a bit. Can you put some flesh on what capital expenditure is being used for that you refer to in that table? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The capital expenditure listed in the 5 years showing here, the 21.2 isn't shown, but 22.3 through to 25.6 will be in the budget report. And those eagle-eyed observers would be able to check whether or not for example, the 4,424,000 in 22-23 for the forecast is the same figure that appears in the budget report when it is published in a week or two. I can tell you but that they may not exactly balance, and that's because this report was produced a few weeks ago and the capital programme has changed, I know, compared to what will be published in the budget report. So what they should be is the standard capital programme. It will include the ADP, for example, is the majority part of that, but it includes the purchase of waste vehicles, for example, some disabled facilities grants. So those types of capital expenditure in the typical capital programme that you will see a breakdown of when the budget comes before council.
Chairman, can I?
Yep.
So you're saying that when we make a recommendation on this report, and in particular item 2, that the capital expenditure forecasts be noted, that in fact actually they've moved and changed?
Thank you, Chair. As noted in 5.3, paragraph 5.3 on page 8.8, the capital expenditure reflected in the table above that Councillor Mason just referred to is the draft position before approval by council, so may change. So that was specifically, I put that in to address the issue that I think the councillor is flagging. The timing is such that you approve the Treasury Management Strategy before you approve the budget. We have to make an assumption about capital expenditure for the forthcoming years in the Treasury Management Strategy, and then because we need to finance it, but then the numbers can change. I would also make the point in terms of materiality that if the figures were significantly different, and they won't be, but if they were significantly different between the years or in absolute terms, and you were using borrowing to fund that capital expenditure, that would be a bigger issue, because then we'd be calculating interest on that borrowing taken out at a certain moment in time. And if that changed in total terms as well as timing terms, that could have some significant impact or a material impact on the revenue account subsequently. But we're not borrowing over the period shown here for any capital expenditure. We're funding it from receipts from asset sales from the past or from reserves, and we've covered some of that in the previous items on this agenda, from reserves or from a revenue contribution or from external funding like disabled facilities grants and some bits of Section 106 funding. So when you incur the capital expenditure in respect of all of those means of funding, they are instantly funded. There's no long-term consequence of spending the capital because you're instantly funding it on a one-off basis. So if the numbers move a little bit, it has hardly any impact on the overall financial position of the council in any case.
Chairman, I'd just like to say thank you for that, and also to be happily assured that we aren't going to be borrowing over the period of this forecast in here. And that will probably be good news to many members, knowing that there is uncertainty around the ADP already. Could I ask a further question, Chairman? The further question is, of course I'm aware of the credit ratings that we abide by and are given guidance upon. But we're in the unusual situation of having pretty poor relations with Russia. Rather, the relations are almost conflict, if not only political conflict. Can I be completely assured that we won't be investing in Russia?
I can give that assurance that we won't invest in Russia. And all I'd add to that is that we have criteria below which we don't invest in a certain country, just as below which we don't invest in certain banks or institutions of various sorts. The only exception to that hard and fast rule about credit ratings is the UK itself, which may fall below what we would normally apply to a country, but because it's the UK, we think on the balance of risk it's safer than something comparable in another country.
Thank you. I could say, Chairman, that in September I had different thoughts. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Any further questions? I've got one, if I may. On page 8.5, paragraph 3.2, the last bullet point, it's how does RDC determine its level of liquidity? Is this based on historic data or things that we've always done, or statutory guidance or benchmarking? Page 8.5, para 3.2, it's the level of liquidity.
There is, Chair, there is a means by which we calculate the level of liquidity. Indeed, it's one of the new criteria that we have to report on. But in terms of, in layman's terms, or layperson's terms, the level of liquidity will be dictated by our cash flow forecasting. So liquidity has been the sort of second most important aspect of our investment strategy, means that we will look over the coming months and years, work out when our cash flow, just as we would in our personal bank accounts, goes up and down, and we wouldn't want to get into an overdrawn position. And if we knew that there was a large payment coming for possibly capital expenditure, they're often large items, large contract payments, then we would make sure that we had sufficient liquidity, sufficient cash available, instantly available if possible. And so the key to that is good financial planning and knowing what's on the horizon. That hasn't always been the case, especially during COVID, when expenditure and income fluctuated all over the place, and it was really hard to ensure that you had sufficient liquidity. The positive aspect for Rochford is that it's possible for you to err on the side of safety and hold plenty of cash, so that is highly unlikely to arise, as compared to another authority that didn't have lots of cash and did have lots of borrowing, where the margins are that much slimmer. And in those cases, there may even be a need for that local authority to take out short-term borrowing to provide the cash to make the payments, which is obviously not desirable, because then you're paying interest on that, and it's not always as attractive as it would be if it was on a more planned basis.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Any final questions? No? Okay, thank you. So we've got the recommendation. So, and we'll take them in turn. So that recommendation 1, that the capital and treasury management strategy statement, including the investment instruments, indicators, limits and delegations contained within the report be noted. Are those noted, members?
Noted, Chairman.
Okay. So, oh yeah, sorry. So from the chair, I'm moving that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Mrs McPherson. So those in favour of recommendation 1? Okay, thank you, members. That's unanimous. Recommendation number 2, that the capital expenditure forecast be noted, and I'll move that from the chair. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Mason, thank you. Those in favour of the recommendation, please indicate. Okay, thank you, members. That's unanimous. Recommendation number 3, that the operational and authorised limits for external debt as laid down in the report be noted. I'll move that from the chair. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Sharp, thank you. Those members in favour, please indicate. Okay, thank you. That's unanimous. And finally, that we recommend to Council that the Capital and Treasury Management Strategy for 2023-24, as set out in this report, be approved. I'll move that from the chair. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Milne. He beat you to it, Councillor Mason. Members, those in favour, please indicate. Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you, members. Okay, members, agenda item 9 is the key decisions document. Are there any questions or observations on the key decisions document? Okay. Councillor Newport. Councillor Mr Newport.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just ask about the key decision 1222, the City Fibre exchange lease? To agree to lease an allocated piece of land. Have we got details of what that land is, please?
Phoebe?
Yeah, it's a small piece of land adjacent to Rayleigh Leisure Centre, which is obviously in our ownership, for them to put their exchange on it, kind of fence it off. Again, obviously, with this, I was due to go in February. We're working with City Fibre at the minute around the exact demise, square footage and all that, at the moment, of how big that site will be. But I'm just trying to look it up on my email, see if I can get more further detail for you.
Okay, Phoebe, that was quite vague, sorry, because I don't know what the location of that land is, and also what sort of noise would be generated by that. Is that something that would have to go to planning? Is that permitted development? How is that dealt with through the planning system? And is that piece of land at the rear of the leisure centre? Because there are plans for the leisure centre as well in terms of provision of football pitches and things like that.
Yep, so looking at the information I have in front of me, and again, apologies. around my explanation, I'm still getting up to date with all our assets 3 months into the job. But where I think the existing skate park is where the proposal is, because obviously we are relocating the skate park in that facility. Final location will be determined, but it's not where it is. And also the other works around that centre, it doesn't impact on that either. We've made sure of that, working with other colleagues around that piece of work. So the proposed site is 12.5 metres by 35, which is the proposed CFH site. My understanding, again, I've checked with planning colleagues, there's no planning permission required from it because of what they are putting on the site. Again, further detail will be published once we've worked up the lease agreement. There'll be a kind of a new gate and track to the site. As it'll be, as I said, all fenced off, lighting columns and CCTV that's already around there will be disconnected, and they will install their own. The site will be set a minimum 3 metres away from the building as well. So that's the information I have to date on it, which I can quickly get up, but further detail will come.
Okay, rather than prolong the agony, can we just, would it be possible if that information is shared with at least the ward councillors, the detail around that? Because I think, are the rules the same, the planning rules are the same as around 5G mass and infrastructure? Is that what we're saying? You're saying there's planning colleagues have said no planning permission required because it's infrastructure, I guess.
Yes.
But there are certain rules around 5G mass. I want to know if it's similar.
Yeah, no, totally,
rules.
that's fine.
So would you be able to, just outside of this committee,
Yeah,
just
definitely,
share
and
that?
obviously we would consult ward members
Okay.
anyway. We're just finalising everything.
And I'm concerned that the progress of the new skate park should be delivered before the old one's removed. So I think that's key in that decision making.
Could I, sorry, you suggested taking it outside the meeting, because it is a key decision about the lease, so... Yeah, I understand you're trying to get it in, but yeah. Can I just go back to 822, which is the Mill Arts and Events Centre in Rayleigh? And if the risk of not taking the decision is that the funds to operate and maintain the asset would be delayed and the impact on service delivery. Have you got a scale for the impact on service delivery?
So currently, members might be aware that the existing leisure team are operating this building with one caretaker under the Fusion contract, one facilities manager. It's not sustainable. The staff are working overtime, a lot of hours. If the funding for the staffing is not approved or built into it, I would potentially have to reduce the opening hours of this building because we couldn't actually safely operate it.
Okay, thank you. Any other observations on the key decisions document? Councillor Reeves.
Thank you, Chair. On the same topic, obviously, as we have not been able to debate the recommendations tonight, what is the effect on this? Is the key decision going to be delayed, or is it just going to go ahead without scrutiny?
I believe there is a scrutiny on the 23rd
Okay, so
of
this
February, so we can bring it to that. I'd have to confer around budget. Fine, okay. Section 1 says it's fine, but yeah, we can bring it back, and then obviously you've got the executive following that, but again, that is, I suppose, a decision around the executive.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Members, moving on to item 10, the work plan. We've got the meeting coming up on the 23rd of February, and I mentioned at the last meeting, but the South Essex Parking Partnership will be in attendance. We should be having a report on the planning processes and procedures. What I would say, and we will have an update on the information on gypsies and travellers, but bearing in mind the point that Phoebe's just made, it might be that we have to just slip in the rework of the report item 6 from tonight. 1st of March, we've got the Community Safety Partnership, and as I mentioned before, the Police and Crime Commissioner will be in attendance, along with the Chief Fire and Chief Police Officers. So we'll have an operational perspective and the overall strategic perspective. And then finally on April, 4th of April, we've got the annual report. We have got some flexibility. So the reason why we only have the annual report in April is just in case anything slips backwards. Yeah, Councillor Newport.
Thank you, Chair. Still extremely disappointed not to see the cost of living scrutiny work on the work plan or in the items to be scheduled list.
And I'll take it off, but I have been in contact with the portfolio holder about the information that is going to the executive, and I've asked for the specific information that you want to put in to form part of that report. But if you're happy, I'll take that offline with you. Okay, thank you.
I was just going to say, can you move the update on the gypsies and travellers to the first?
Yeah.
Because it does come under
Yeah.
access.
Okay, I've just had a suggestion from the Vice Chair, which is just for ease of management of the meeting on the 23rd of February, it's suggested that we move the update of the Gypsy and Travellers community to the Community Safety Partnership, because they are actually two related topics. That would actually make sense and dovetail nicely. Thank you. Any further points? Okay, thank you, members. So that concludes the meeting at 21:07. Thank you.